Welcome to the Chamber Files. Every account you are about to hear was submitted to us by a real person. These are not dramatizations. These are not stories pulled from a movie or pieced together from a headline. These are first-hand experiences sent to us by people who needed someone else to know what happened to them. If something has happened to you, we want to hear it. Send your story to thechamberfiles@gmail.com. Tonight, 3 people share what happened when ordinary situations turned into something they will never stop thinking about. These are their words. Story 1. The Motel on the Edge of Town. My name is Greg. I do commercial refrigeration repair for a living. Last fall, my company was short-staffed, so they started sending me out to cover smaller towns that our regular guys normally handle. For 3 nights, I was assigned to a small town in northern Pennsylvania to service the walk-in freezers at an older family-owned supermarket. The kind of town I am talking about is the kind where things close early and empty storefronts outnumber open ones. My company booked me into the only motel nearby that had vacancy. A single-floor place on the edge of town, maybe 12 rooms total. All the doors face the parking lot. I got there a little after 7 on a Thursday evening. The office smelled like old coffee and bleach. The woman at the desk was probably in her 60s. Friendly enough, but there was something distracted about her. She kept glancing past me toward the parking lot while I was checking in. When she handed me the key, she told me that if anyone knocked on my door at night, I should not answer it unless it was her or the owner. She said if I heard anything strange outside, I should call the office and not get involved. She said it in a casual voice, like it was standard advice, like she said it to everyone. I asked if the area had a crime problem. She said there were some drifters around sometimes who liked to ask guests for money. I remember thinking it was an odd thing to say to someone who had just arrived. But I was tired and hungry, and I let it go. My room was near the far end of the building, second to last. It was clean enough, but old. Cigarette burns in the dresser. Dark spots on the carpet. I dropped my bag, walked down to the gas station for food, and came back around 8. On my way back to my room, I noticed a man sitting in an older dark green pickup truck, 2 spaces from mine. The truck was running. The headlights were off. I could not see his face clearly in the dark, but I noticed that he did not look at me the way a person normally does when someone walks by. He sat completely still, both hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. I assumed he was waiting for someone. I went inside. 8. Watched some stuff on my phone. Around 10:30, I showered and got into bed. Maybe 20 minutes later, I heard footsteps on the walkway outside my room. That was not unusual on its own. Other guests were staying there. But the footsteps slowed and stopped directly in front of my door. I waited for the sound of a key going into the room next to mine, or a knock, or something. Nothing happened, just silence. Then, after maybe 15 seconds, the steps moved on. A minute later, they came back. Same direction, same pace, same stop right outside my door. Still no knock, just silence again. Then they moved on a second time. I got up and looked through the peephole. The walkway was empty. I told myself it was probably someone drunk, confused about which room was theirs. I got back into bed. A little after 11, half asleep, someone knocked on my door. I stayed still. Then the knock came again. Exact same pattern. Same rhythm. I got up quietly and looked through the peephole. Nobody there. That made my stomach drop. I stood at the door for a while. The walkway was empty in both directions. I checked the deadbolt even though I had already locked it. I was about to get back into bed when I noticed the curtain near the window had shifted. Not wide open, just slightly. Enough to let in a thin line of dark. Enough for someone standing at the right angle outside to see in. I pulled it fully closed, turned off the lamp. Lay in the dark listening. Right around midnight I heard it. A soft metallic scraping sound near the door, like something thin being worked against the lock mechanism. Not loud. Careful. Patient. I stepped as quietly as I could to the door and looked through the peephole. This time, I saw something. A figure crouched low, almost below the peephole's field of view. I could only see the top of a dark baseball cap and one shoulder. I stood there, looking at it. Could not have been more than 5 seconds. Then the figure stood up and moved off fast toward the end of the building. I called the office immediately. The woman who answered sounded annoyed until I told her someone had been crouched right outside my door. Then she went quiet. She asked if I had opened it. I said no. She told me to stay inside. Said the owner was going to check the lot. About 2 minutes later, headlights swept across the curtain. Someone drove slowly through the parking area and then left. The office called back and told me nobody was out there now. Probably just someone messing around. When I asked about calling the police, she said it would not do any good unless the person came back. I barely slept. Every sound pulled me back awake. Around 3 in the morning, I passed out from exhaustion. I woke at 5:15 to the sound of my truck's door alarm. I got to the window and looked out without moving the curtain much. A man was standing at the driver's side of my truck. Tall, dark jacket, hat, pulled low. The door was half open. He had his back to me. Then, like he felt something, he turned and looked directly at my room window. Looked right at where I was standing. He shut the truck door and walked fast toward the road behind the motel. I called 911. Police came about 15 minutes later. They took a report, checked my truck. Nothing was missing, because I never leave anything in it. One officer asked if I was sure I had locked it. I could tell right there they were not fully taking me seriously. But the older officer on scene seemed more engaged when I described the crouching figure outside my door. He asked the motel owner about security cameras. There was one in the office and one covering the front entrance. Nothing on my side of the lot. Before leaving, the older officer told me that if it happened again, I should not open my door for any reason, and that I should leave as early as I could in the morning. I asked if he thought it was random. He said probably, but his expression did not match the word. I had work the next day. I was already there. I stayed. During the day, everything felt normal. I was at the supermarket from 7 in the morning until almost 6 in the evening. When I got back to the motel that night, I parked directly under the brightest light in the lot and brought all my tools inside at once so I would not have to go back out. The woman at the desk saw me come in and asked if I was okay. I told her I had not slept. She hesitated. Then she offered to move me to room 2, near the office. I asked why she had not offered that the night before. She said she did not think it was necessary. Then she added something that I have thought about more than once since then. She said it usually does not happen 2 nights in a row. I asked what she meant by that. She immediately acted like she had misspoken. Said the drifters normally move on. Moved behind the counter like the conversation was over. That made me more uneasy than anything that had happened the night before. I thought seriously about packing my truck and driving an hour to another town. But I was exhausted. I was filthy from work. I told myself one more night, and I would be gone in the morning. Around 8, I got food, and came back to my room. While I was eating, I heard a vehicle drive slowly through the lot. I looked through the curtain. The same dark green pickup from the night before. Same truck. It drove past my room, turned around near the road exit, and parked at the far end of the lot with the headlights off. I called the office. The owner answered this time. He sounded irritated. Told me that if the truck was not blocking me in or causing damage, there was not much he could do. I asked if he knew who it was. He said people come and go. I sat watching the window for close to an hour. The truck did not move. Eventually, I turned off the TV and the lamp and lay down on top of the covers with my clothes on. Sometime after 11, I heard footsteps again. Slow. Deliberate. And then, a soft tap at the window. Not the door. The window. I stayed completely still. A second tap came, closer to the center of the glass. Then something thin, a fingernail or a small tool, dragged slowly from the top of the window toward the bottom. I could hear it clearly through the glass. It was not a noise made by accident. It was made to be heard. I had never felt fear like that before in my adult life, because whoever it was already knew I was in there, and they were not trying to be subtle anymore. I grabbed my phone and started dialing 911. Before I hit call, I heard the small frosted window above the bathroom toilet begin to rattle. And then I heard something worse. The sound of the door to the room next to mine being worked open. Not a keycard. Something else working the mechanism, slow and careful. Then the door opened. That room had been empty since I checked in. I had confirmed it the night before by looking through the curtain gap. No car, no lights. I got out of bed and crouched against the shared wall between the rooms. I could hear movement next door. Not the heavy, settled sounds of someone checking in. The careful, deliberate sounds of someone trying not to be heard. I called 911 and whispered everything I could to the dispatcher. She told me to stay on the line. While I was talking, I heard one hard knock on the shared wall, behind the headboard, testing it. Then another, lower down. Then nothing. I was listening so hard I could hear my own heartbeat. Then the bathroom window in my room started to move again. Not rattling, opening. Slowly, I ran to the bathroom and threw both hands against it, pressing it shut. Something on the other side pushed back. Once. Not hard, but enough to feel. I shoved the latch into place, even though the hardware looked like it would not hold much. Then, I backed out of the bathroom and stood against the far wall. The dispatcher told me officers were 2 minutes out. Now I could hear movement at my front door as well, like more than one set of feet. Then came soft knocks at the door. The same rhythm as the night before. I dragged the room chair to the door and jammed it under the knob. Stood back. Waited. The headlights hit the curtain maybe 60 seconds later, and the moment they did, I heard running. At least 2 sets of footsteps moving fast across the lot. The officers found the window screen from my room lying in the bushes beside the building. They found fresh pry marks on my truck door. And they found fresh tool marks on the door of the empty room next to mine, where someone had forced entry. What I did not know until later was this. The older officer came to me privately before leaving. He asked if I had anyone with a reason to come after me, if I had posted anywhere online about where I was staying. I said no to both. He told me they had seen that green pickup before. In the past 6 months, there had been 2 other incidents at that same motel involving men staying alone for work. In one case, the man reported hearing people outside his room, but left before filing a full report. In the other case, the man woke to find his motel door cracked open. He was certain he had locked it. Nothing had been taken in either incident. The officer said they believed a group had been following out-of-town men, watching them from bars or work sites, and then waiting until they were isolated and alone before attempting to get inside. He did not say out loud what he thought the end goal was. He did not need to. I started packing while 2 officers stood outside my door. Before I zipped my bag, I checked under the bed, something I do not normally do anywhere. My phone charger had fallen off the nightstand, and when I reached under for it, I saw a folded square of paper pushed almost to the wall. I pulled it out. It was torn from a local newspaper. On the back, written in pen, was my room number and my truck plate. They had not picked me at random that night. Someone had watched me long enough to write things down. I checked out before 1 in the morning and drove almost 2 hours home. My company sent another technician the following week. He stayed in a different town. I have not thought about it every day, but I think about it enough. Story 2. The man who found me first. My name is Becca. This happened starting in October of last year, when I downloaded a dating app for the first time in a while. I was single and thought it might be worth trying. After a few days of using it, I matched with a guy. His name on the app was Damien. He said he was stationed at a military base not too far from where I lived. We started talking, and it moved fast. Every day, all day. He was easy to talk to in the beginning. After a few weeks, the tone changed. He started saying things like, "You are mine. If I cannot have you, no one can." He told me once that if I blocked him or removed him from my contacts, he would find me. He said it plainly. not in an angry burst. Just said it, and kept talking like it was a normal part of conversation. We never met in person. We were not in a relationship. But he spoke like he owned something he had never touched. Then one day in December, he removed me from his contacts without a word. I did not hear from him again. I moved on with my life, told myself it was over, and honestly felt relieved. That lasted about 8 weeks. Then, he added me back. I still remembered what he had said. And because I remembered it, I accepted the request. Because I was afraid of what ignoring it might cause. His first message after coming back was this. He said he had been thinking about my smile for 8 weeks. That he kept thinking about what we could have been if he had not let his dark thoughts take over. I typed back something short and neutral. I was responding out of fear, not interest. Every answer I gave was carefully worded to keep him calm. He started asking where I was going, who I was with, what time I would be home. He asked me repeatedly to turn on my location sharing so he could, as he put it, make sure I was safe. I told him I forgot. I told him my phone was acting up. I kept finding reasons to avoid it. The following Thursday, I had been out with a friend until about 1 in the morning. He dropped me off near my house. We said goodbye. I walked up the alleyway toward my front door. I had never given Damien my address. Not once. Not even a neighborhood or a street name. There was a man standing in the alley. I did not think much of it at first. Then he said my name. I stopped. I said yes, who was asking. Then I saw his face. My whole body went cold. My hands started shaking before my brain had even fully registered what was happening. He grabbed me by the throat with one hand and slammed the back of my head into the wall hard. Then he looked at my face up close, studied it, like he was confirming something. He asked who I had been with. He asked why I was out that late. He asked if it was a man. I could not speak. His grip on my throat was tight enough that breathing took all my focus. My eyes were watering, not from crying, from the pressure. I genuinely believed in that moment that I was going to die in that alley. He tightened his grip further. Then, without warning, he threw me down. My head hit the ground first. I lay there gasping, looking up at him. He sat on top of me and hit me across the face with an open hand. When I looked up at him again, his expression had not changed. There was nothing behind his eyes. No anger cooling down. No regret starting to form. Just nothing. He put his hands around my throat again. I remember looking up at the sky above the alley. Black and still. I thought about my dog who had passed away the year before. I remember my face relaxing. I think my body was beginning to accept what was coming. Then, he let go. He stood up, looked at his phone, and said he had to go. The last bus was leaving in 3 minutes. Then he turned and walked fast out of the alley. I lay on the cold, wet ground trying to breathe. I called my best friend. I could not speak. My vocal cords had taken enough damage that no sound came out. My friend only heard strange noises from my end. He said he was coming. When I got to his place, I fell asleep on the couch within minutes. While I was sleeping, he called the police. The next morning, he drove me to the station to give my statement. After the officers heard everything, they told me my situation was serious enough that they were not comfortable letting me leave without protection. They gave me a personal alarm and a tracking device with a direct alert button that would immediately notify officers of my location, because they expected him to come back. 3 days later, I was followed by someone connected to him, a friend of his, based on what police later told me. If my own friend had not been picking me up at exactly that moment, I do not know how that afternoon would have ended. The police told me directly that Damien's intention had been to kill me. If there had been a later bus that night, if he had his own car, I would not be here to tell this story. Every time I leave my house now, I scan the street before I reach the sidewalk. I check the alley before I walk through it. I know that is not a way to live, but it is the only way I know how to right now. I did not give him my address. I did not give him any way to find me. He found me anyway. Please be careful, because sometimes the threat does not wait for you to make a mistake. Sometimes it is already there when you arrive. Story 3. The campsite in the Smokies. My name is Aaron. This happened last October when I decided to take a solo camping trip in the Great Smoky Mountains. I had been running on empty from work for months and just needed a few quiet days with no phone calls, no meetings, no noise. I had done solo trips before, never had a problem. So this felt routine. I left early in the morning. The drive took most of the day. A couple hours before reaching the park, I stopped at a small roadside diner for a late lunch. The place was nearly empty. A few older locals nursing coffee, and a waitress who looked like she had been working that counter since the place was built. I sat at the counter and ordered a burger and fries. A man was sitting a few stools down from me. He was not doing anything strange exactly, but I noticed him glancing in my direction without fully turning his head. At one point, he asked where I was headed. I told him I was going camping up in the mountains. He nodded and said to be careful out there. I asked what he meant. He shrugged and said it gets real quiet out there at night. I paid and left. By late afternoon, I reached the trailhead where I planned to park. A dirt pull-off with no other vehicles, no signs, no facilities. I grabbed my gear and started hiking in. The trail was not hard, but it moved slower than I expected. By the time I found a good clearing to set up, the light was already going gray. I rushed. Got the tent up. Got a small fire going just as the last of the daylight disappeared into the tree line. Sitting by that fire felt good at first. I made some food, leaned back, listened to the usual sounds. Wind through the canopy. Insects, the ordinary background noise of the woods at night. Then I heard footsteps in the leaves, moving toward me. Too heavy for an animal that size. Too deliberate for something wandering. I looked up. A man was standing maybe 30 feet away, just inside the tree line. Facing me. Still. I called out asking if he was all right. He stepped a little closer into the edge of the firelight. He said, "Hello." Just that one word. Nothing else. I asked if he was camping nearby. Instead of answering, he asked if I was out there alone. My stomach dropped. I told him no, that my friends were on their way and would be there soon. That was a complete lie. But something about the way he asked the question made the lie come out automatically. He nodded slowly, then turned around and walked back into the darkness between the trees. I watched him the entire time. As he got farther away, his outline started disappearing into the dark. And right before he fully vanished, he stopped, turned back around, faced me again from inside the shadows. I got the impression he did not realize I could still see him from where I was sitting. I could barely make out his shape. But he was there, just standing, looking toward the fire. I looked down at my phone so he would not know I was watching him back. When I looked up again, he was gone. I sat by the fire for another half hour, listening. Nothing else moved. Eventually, I put the fire out and got into my tent. I told myself I was overreacting, that he was probably just a curious hiker, that the woods do strange things to your nerves at night. I lay there trying to settle down, and for a while, the quiet helped. Then, about an hour later, the footsteps came back. Closer this time. Moving in a slow circle around my campsite. Leaves crunching in a wide arc around the tent. One full rotation. Then another. Then the footsteps stopped right outside. Everything went silent. I held my breath without deciding to. I did not know if someone was standing 6 inches from the thin wall of my tent. I could not hear anything. Then, I heard it. A slow exhale. A man breathing. Calm and steady. Right outside the fabric. He was not trying to scare me. I do not think he knew I could hear it. My senses were so sharpened in that silence that I was picking up sounds I would never notice under normal circumstances. Every part of me said, "Do not move. Do not let him know you are awake." I lay completely still and waited. After a long time, the footsteps slowly moved away. I let myself breathe, waited another 10 minutes. Then the footsteps came back and circled the tent again. The same patient, methodical pattern. Stop at the same point. The same silence. This continued for hours. Sometimes the steps would fade all the way off and I would think it was over. Then they would return. I began to wonder if it was more than one person. I could not explain why. Something about the timing of the sounds, the way they came from slightly different angles on different passes. I could not confirm it. But the feeling did not leave me. By the time the inside of my tent started lightening with early dawn, I had not slept for a single minute. As soon as there was enough gray light to move by, I started packing. My hands were shaking. I stuffed things into my bag without organizing anything, just filling it. When I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, I heard multiple sets of footsteps running away through the trees. Not one person. Several, moving fast through the leaves in different directions at once. I could not see anyone, but I could hear them clearly. That was the moment I stopped questioning whether any of it had been real. I grabbed what I had packed and walked fast back toward the trail. I kept listening for sounds behind me the whole way. Nothing followed. I reached my car, locked the doors, and sat there until my breathing slowed down. At some point, I fell asleep in the driver's seat. I woke up hours later with the sun high and the lot still quiet. Part of me considered going back in for the gear I had left behind. It was full daylight now. I told myself whatever had happened in the dark would not happen in daylight. I walked back down the trail. When I reached the clearing, I stopped. My tent was gone. My sleeping bag was gone. The small cooking equipment I had left in my rush was gone. Everything I had left behind had been taken. Every last piece. The only thing remaining was the black circle of ash from the fire. I walked the perimeter of the clearing twice, thinking I had the wrong spot. But the trees were the same. The rocks were the same. The ash circle was in exactly the right place. Someone had cleared everything out while I was sleeping in my car. I did not look for my gear. I did not report it. I walked back to my car, started it, and drove home. Losing the equipment did not matter to me by that point. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was that I had made it back to the car. I have not gone camping alone since. And sometimes, late at night, I think about how many people were actually standing outside that tent. How close they were. How long they waited. And what they were waiting for me to do. That is Greg, Becca, and Aaron. 3 people who left home for something ordinary and came back changed. If their stories stayed with you, make sure you are subscribed to the Chamber Files right now. New first-hand accounts drop every single week from real people who need someone else to know what happened to them. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one. And if something has happened to you, at a motel, on a road, in the woods, somewhere you thought was safe, send it to us. The address is thechamberfiles@gmail.com. We read every single submission. We will see you in the next one, if you are still awake. Welcome to the Chamber Files. Every account you are about to hear was submitted to us by a real person. These are not dramatizations. These are not stories someone pieced together from a headline. These are first-hand experiences, sent to us by people who needed someone else to know what happened to them inside the one place they thought was ordinary. The job. The office, the place they showed up to every single day. If something has happened to you, we want to hear it. Send your story to thechamberfiles@gmail.com. Tonight, 3 people share what happened when the person working right next to them turned out to be someone they never actually knew at all. These are their words. Story 1. The intern who knew where I lived. My name is Ryan. I was 20 years old, heading into my senior year of college, and I had just landed a summer internship at a financial services firm downtown. It was not a glamorous position, mostly data entry, spreadsheets, and sitting in front of a screen for 8 hours a day. But it paid well enough and looked good on a resume, so I was not complaining. There were 7 other interns working alongside me. We were all crammed into an open office section with rows of low cubicles. Not quite enough wall to give you real privacy, just enough to make small talk feel optional. 5 of the 7 were people I genuinely liked. Normal college students, relaxed, not taking themselves too seriously. The 6th, a guy named Eric, treated the internship like his career depended on every single keystroke. He barely spoke. Fine by me. But the seventh intern, a guy named Dennis, was something different entirely. When I first met him, he seemed normal enough, maybe a little awkward, but we all were at the beginning. He was tall and thin, kind of pale, with a mop of dark hair that always looked like it had not been washed recently. He did not fit the finance intern type. But that was not what unsettled me. It was the way he acted specifically around me. At first it was subtle. He would appear at my cubicle during the workday, lean over the divider, and because the walls were low, only his head would be visible above the top. He would tilt it slightly to one side, stretch this frozen grin across his face, and start talking in this deliberately slow, unnatural voice. Like he was performing something. Like he had practiced being unsettling. He would say things like, working hard or hardly working, drawn out and exaggerated, and then hold that smile for a beat too long before disappearing back to his desk. The first couple of times, I laughed it off. Some people are awkward at the start of a new job. Some people try too hard to be memorable. I did not want to make it into something bigger than it was. But it kept happening. Every single day. At least once. Sometimes more. That head would rise slowly above the cubicle wall. That same stretched smile, and then whatever strange disconnected thing he felt like saying that day. Always in that same soft, deliberate, slightly taunting voice. The other interns noticed. They laughed it off too, mostly. Some of them assumed Dennis and I had developed some kind of inside joke that the rest of them were not part of. But that was not it. There was no joke between us. He directed it only at me, and the longer it continued, the more that detail started to feel significant. As the weeks went on, the visits got longer. He would lean over and stay there, sometimes barely speaking at all, just looking at me. I would fake a laugh, say I had a deadline to hit, and wait for him to take the hint. He rarely did. Then, about 6 weeks into the internship, my phone rang at home during dinner. Number I did not recognize. I normally let those go, but I was expecting a delivery confirmation, so I picked up. Silence for a few seconds. And then a voice I recognized immediately. Dennis, that same slow performed tone he used at work. He said, "The tide is coming in. Pull your boat out of the water." And he dragged the words out like he was reading from something only he could see. Then he burst out laughing, loud, unhinged, completely detached. And he hung up. I sat there holding my phone. I had never given Dennis my number. Not once. Not in passing. Not through any group thread. I texted the number back asking if it was him. The message came back undelivered. When I looked up the number, it was a landline. I could not figure out how he had gotten it, and I could not figure out how he had gotten a landline that could not receive texts. I tried to come up with a logical explanation. Maybe a company contact sheet. Maybe something posted in the intern onboarding materials. But even the most rational explanation I could build did not explain the call itself. The way he said that line. The laugh at the end. That was not a prank between friends. That was someone who wanted to frighten me. When I got to the office on Monday, Dennis was not there. His desk was empty. I went to our supervisor, a man named Greg, and asked whether Dennis might have accessed my number through company records. Greg was confused. He explained that interns did not have access to employee contact information. Then, he told me Dennis had been let go at the end of the previous week for failing to complete his work and ignoring multiple warnings. I told Greg about the call. He was surprised. Some of the other interns were nearby and overheard. A few of them started nodding, saying they had always found Dennis uncomfortable to be around, that he had made them uneasy too, but they had not said anything. Greg told me not to worry. Dennis was gone. He had no reason to come back. For about a week after that, I kept waiting for something else to happen. A message. A random encounter. Something. But nothing came. The office went back to normal. I almost convinced myself it was over. Then came the Friday morning. It was around 5 in the morning. Still dark outside, with just a thin gray line starting to show through the blinds. Something woke me up, a sound I could not immediately identify. I lay still for a moment, then got up and looked out my bedroom window. I wish I had not. Standing in my backyard, about halfway between the tree line and the edge of the porch light, was a figure, looking up at my window. Even in that low light, I knew immediately. The height, the thin frame, the way he stood completely straight. It was Dennis. I could not move for a few seconds. I just stood at the window looking at him, looking at me. Then he called my name. In that same voice, slow and stretched and performative, like he was doing a bit for an audience only he could see. I grabbed my phone to call 911. And then he tilted his head back and started laughing. That same laugh from the phone call, loud and unraveling at the edges, like something inside him had come loose. I yelled through the glass that I was calling the police, that he needed to get off my property. I held my phone up so he could see it. He stood there for another moment. Then he turned and walked away, still laughing, disappearing into the trees at the back of the yard. I called the police. When the dispatcher asked if he was still on the property, I said no. She told me to call back if he returned or made a direct threat. The officers could not do much without him being present and without a threat that met the legal threshold. I never saw Dennis again after that morning. Not at the office, not around the neighborhood, nowhere. The rest of the summer passed without anything. I finished the internship. My boss offered me a full-time position starting after graduation. I accepted. I never told them about the morning in my backyard. Dennis was gone, and there was nothing left to report that the police had not already logged. I took a different job after graduation anyway. I did not go back. It has been a few years now. I do not think about it often. But that image of him standing in my yard in the dark, laughing at something no one else was in on, that one has stayed with me, and I still do not know how he got my number. I still do not know how he found my address. I just know that for one summer of my life, I worked next to someone who was not simply strange. Whatever was happening inside Dennis, it went a lot deeper than awkward. Story 2. The coworker who knew too much. I was 17 when this happened. It was my first real job, working at a grocery store in a small town in Vermont. The kind of town where nothing really happens, where people leave their doors unlocked and everyone knows what car their neighbor drives. I liked the job at first. It was simple. The other cashiers were friendly. During the slow stretches when customers were sparse, we would all drift toward the front of the store and just talk. About TV shows, about customers we found difficult, about whatever. It was the part of the shift I actually looked forward to. There was one coworker I did not know well at first. His name was Daniel. He was 24 and worked the dairy section, so our paths did not cross much during actual work hours. He was quiet, a little awkward in the way some people are when they never quite learned how to read a room. He nodded when you passed him. That was about it. Then I was added to a group chat for the younger employees. Daniel was in it. I did not think anything of that, but then he started messaging me directly. At first, it was work-related. Shift questions, coverage requests, normal enough. But over the next few weeks, it shifted. He started asking about my personal life, what music I was listening to, what I did on weekends, what my plans were after work. I brushed it off at first as small talk, but the tone was different from how people usually make small talk. There was a persistence to it, a direction. He called me cute in ways that made me uncomfortable. He made comments that sat in that gray zone between friendly and something else. I was 17. He was 24. And I was fairly certain none of my other coworkers knew he was speaking to me that way. I did not know how to address it without making things awkward on the floor every day. So I mostly ignored his messages and kept things surface level at work. Then one afternoon, all of us were gathered at the front of the store between rushes. We were talking about TV shows. I mentioned something, and Daniel looked over at me and asked, "You like Stranger Things, right?" I went still. I had not told anyone at work what I was watching. Not in the group chat. Not in passing. I had not mentioned it to anyone there at all. I had just spent several days at home binge-watching it alone in my bedroom. I nodded and said yeah, casually, trying not to show the cold feeling that had moved through my stomach. He smiled, said nothing else, and eventually drifted back to the dairy section. But I could not let it go. Because there was only one way he could have known that. And it was not because I had told him. A few nights later, I was in bed trying to fall asleep when I heard it. A soft scraping sound against my bedroom window. I told myself it was a branch, wind, something ordinary. Then it came again. A faint tapping. Deliberate. Just light enough to be deniable. I got up and looked through the blinds. I could not see anything in the dark outside. But I also could not explain the sound away, and all I could think about was that question at work. The one he had no reason to know the answer to. A few days later, he texted me again. This time I was done being careful about his feelings. I told him directly that I was not interested, and that he needed to stop messaging me. His reply came back almost immediately. He said, "Okay. Good luck changing your address." I read it twice. Then I took a screenshot. Then I went to my manager and showed him everything. The messages, the screenshots, the timeline. My manager was visibly shaken. He told me not to worry, that they would handle it. My father drove me to the local police department that same day. I filed a report. I showed them the messages. I described what I believed had happened at my window and explained the comment about Stranger Things, the one he had no way of knowing unless he had been watching me somewhere outside my home. The next day, Daniel was called into the office. He did not come back after that. He was fired on the spot, and the police began the process of filing for a restraining order. I thought that would be the end of it. But knowing a restraining order existed did not make me feel safe, because if someone is willing to stand outside your bedroom window in the dark, a piece of paper is not what is standing between you and them. What is standing between you and them is luck and timing, and whether they decide to come back that night or not. I started checking my locks before bed. Every night. I stopped sharing anything about my routines. I woke up at sounds that would not have registered before. I lay in the dark, convincing myself I had not heard something outside when I was not fully sure that I had not. The weeks passed. Nothing happened. He did not come back. He did not contact me again. The restraining order held. And slowly, across months, the fear started to loosen its grip. But it left something behind. I became more cautious with new people. More aware of when something feels slightly off, before I can put a reason to it. More willing to trust that instinct instead of talking myself out of it. That is the part no one tells you about these situations. It is not always what almost happened that stays with you. Sometimes it is the realization of how long it was building before you noticed. All those small, seemingly harmless moments that were actually pieces of something you had not yet seen the full shape of. I moved on. I work somewhere else now. I live somewhere different. I do not think about Daniel every day, but the lesson he taught me without meaning to, that is one I have not forgotten. When someone crosses a line, even a small one, even early, take it seriously. Do not wait until the shape becomes obvious. Story 3. The Man Who Locked the Door. I was 26 when this happened. I had been working at a small insurance office in a quiet part of Pennsylvania for about 8 months, the kind of office tucked behind a strip mall. One long row of desks, fluorescent lights overhead, the smell of coffee at all hours. Not exciting work. But it was stable. It paid what I needed it to, and I liked most of the people there. On a particular Friday, I stayed late to help close up. We were behind on a batch of client records that needed to be filed before the weekend. I had volunteered to stay because the overtime was useful. That morning, I had woken up to dark skies and a storm warning running across every local news channel. By 3 in the afternoon, the rain was coming down hard enough that you could not see to the end of the parking lot. Thunder was rolling through every few minutes, shaking the windows in their frames. Most of the office left early when the manager decided to let people go before it got worse. 2 of us stayed. Me and a man named Carl. Carl had started working there about 2 weeks earlier. He was in his early 30s. Tall. Quiet. Not unfriendly exactly, just always slightly off in a way I could never pinpoint. If I went to get coffee, he would appear in the break room 2 minutes later. If I was at the supply station, he would show up with something to grab nearby. I had written it off as a new employee, not quite knowing where he fit in yet. Some people hover a little when they are new. By 5 o'clock, the storm had built into something serious. Lightning flashing every few seconds. Thunder that came through the floor rather than just the ceiling. The office felt emptier than usual, without the normal hum of other people moving around. Carl was at his desk a few rows down, typing something on his computer. Every time I looked up, he was looking back. Around 6:30, the lights flickered. We both made the same nervous sound at the same moment. Then the power went out completely. The emergency lights came on, orange-tinted, dim, casting long shadows down the hallways. The storm outside was the only sound. I said something about maybe this being a sign we should both head home. Carl did not respond. I heard the jingle of keys. Then the sound of the front door locking. He said something quietly about it not being safe to go out in this. I told myself he was probably just being cautious. But something about the way he said it did not sit right with me. I grabbed my bag and jacket from my desk, figuring I would wait out the worst of it, and then slip out. When I came back toward the front of the office, Carl was standing at the glass door. Not moving. Just staring out into the dark, rain-soaked parking lot. I told him I was going to call my boyfriend quickly to let him know I would be home soon. He said nothing. I walked toward the break room and checked my phone. No signal. The storm had probably taken out the nearest tower. I tried the office landline. Dead. When I turned around to go back to the main floor, Carl was standing in the doorway behind me. I had not heard him follow me. He was holding a small flashlight pointed up under his chin, throwing shadows across his face. He had a half smile, like he thought the moment was funny. I forced a laugh and told him he had startled me. Then I asked again about unlocking the front door so I could leave. He said it was better to wait until the storm calmed down, that it was not safe yet. I said fine. I went back to my desk to finish packing up slowly, trying to look calm, buying myself time to think. When I looked up again a few minutes later, Carl was gone. I did not wait to find out where he had gone. I moved immediately toward the back of the office, toward the rear exit that led to the smaller parking lot where my car was sitting. The handle did not move. I looked down. A chain had been looped through the door handle and secured with a padlock. That door had never been chained before. Not in the 8 months I had worked there. Not once. I heard the faint glow of the flashlight start moving down the hallway behind me. I stepped into the supply closet beside the break room and pulled the door shut as quietly as I could. Stood against the back wall. Controlled my breathing. I heard Carl walk slowly down the hall. Then I heard him say my name, in a calm voice, almost gentle. He said he just wanted to make sure I was safe. I did not move. I did not make a sound. I could see the thin strip of light from his flashlight moving under the door gap. It passed. Then it was gone. I stood in that closet for what I estimated was 10 minutes, maybe longer. Then I opened the door a crack and looked. The hallway was empty. The flashlight beam was gone. I moved carefully toward the front of the office. When I came around the corner, I stopped. The front glass door was shattered. Rain was blowing straight through into the office, soaking the carpet just inside the entrance. Carl was nowhere in the room. I did not stop to process it. I ran through the broken door into the pouring rain and sprinted across the lot to my car. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped my keys twice before I got the engine started. I pulled out of that parking lot without looking back once. When I got home, I locked every door and sat on my living room floor with wet clothes and no real idea what had just happened. I did not sleep that night. The next morning, I called my manager and told him everything. He did not believe me until he arrived at the office and saw the broken glass himself. He called the police, who came and took my statement. Carl's car was still in the parking lot. Unlocked. Keys on the driver's seat. His phone and wallet were inside. His personal items were still at his desk. The security footage from that evening showed nothing. because the cameras had been manually disabled earlier in the day. Before the power went out. Before the storm had even fully arrived. Nobody ever found Carl. Nobody ever saw him again. Some of my co-workers suggested afterward that he must have had some kind of breakdown, that the storm had pushed him to some kind of edge. I have considered that explanation. It is the one that makes the most sense on the surface. But the cameras were turned off before any of it started, and the back door had been chained shut. And I was alone in that building with him when both of those things were already in place. I quit a month later. Not because anything else happened, but because I could not sit in that office under those fluorescent lights and not think about what that night was building toward before the front door gave me a way out. I still think about it more than I would like to admit. That is Ryan, a 17-year-old first working in Vermont, and a woman who stayed late on a stormy Friday in Pennsylvania. 3 people who showed up to work the same way you do and found something waiting for them that no job description prepares you for. If their stories stayed with you, make sure you are subscribed to the Chamber Files right now. New first-hand accounts drop every single week from real people who need someone else to know what happened to them. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one. And if something has happened to you, at work, alone, somewhere that felt ordinary until it did not, send it to us. The address is thechamberfiles@gmail.com. We read every single submission. We will see you in the next one, if you are still awake. Welcome to the Chamber Files. Every account you are about to hear was submitted to us by a real person. These are not dramatizations. These are not stories pulled from a movie or assembled from a headline. These are first-hand experiences, sent to us by people who needed someone else to know what happened to them. Tonight, 3 people share what happened when a routine transaction on a familiar website put them face-to-face with something they were not prepared for. These are their words. Story 1. The Couch. My name is Jamie. I was 22 years old and I was moving out. My roommate had left a couple of months earlier, and without him splitting the rent, I could not keep the house. The lease was ending anyway, so I found a smaller apartment nearby. The problem was the size. The apartment was significantly smaller than the house, which meant I had nowhere to put most of my furniture. The couch especially. It was barely a year old, in good condition, and my roommate and I had paid real money for it when he moved in. Leaving it on the side of the road felt like a waste I could not afford. I needed cash for the move. So I listed it on Craigslist. It was my first time selling anything on the site. I had bought things before, and never had a serious problem. Being the one selling felt safer, I told myself, because I would be at my own home. On my own ground. It took a little over 2 weeks before anyone seriously interested reached out. When someone finally did, he called me directly to ask about the couch before committing to anything. I remember thinking that was a good sign, like he was trying to be careful too. He said his name was David. He told me he had just moved into a new house and needed affordable furniture to fill it out. I told him I was in the opposite situation, leaving a house for somewhere smaller. He asked politely why I was downsizing, and for some reason, maybe because he sounded normal, maybe because I was tired and not thinking clearly, I told him more than I needed to. I told him my roommate had moved out, and I could not cover the rent alone anymore. We scheduled a time. Saturday evening, around 6. 6 came and went. I sat on the couch, waiting for over an hour. When nothing happened, I got up, shut the front door, and went to the kitchen to make food. I figured he had bailed. Then the doorbell rang. It was 7:30. I took a breath, put on something close to a smile, and opened the door. He introduced himself as David and reached out for a handshake. He was tall, broadly built, with a wide grin that seemed fixed in place. I shook his hand and led him into the living room. He looked at the couch, nodded like he approved, and I felt myself start to relax just slightly. Then I heard footsteps on the porch. The front door opened behind me. 2 more men walked in. "Sorry," David said. "These are my buddies. They are moving in with me too. Hope that is okay." I said yeah, of course, because I did not know what else to say. But my stomach dropped the moment those words left my mouth. Something was wrong. I could feel it before I had any reason I could name. I told myself I was overthinking it. I tried to push the feeling down. David walked around to the far side of the couch and crouched slightly, like he was examining something along the base of it. Then, he stood back up. "What is that over there?" he said, pointing down toward the side panel. I walked over and looked. I did not see anything. He pointed again, lower, as if he wanted me to crouch down and look more closely. The other two men had moved while my attention was on David. They were standing behind me now. I knelt down and looked along the side of the couch. There was nothing there. I could feel all three of them around me, their presence pressing in from above. My body registered what my brain was still trying to reason away. I felt completely exposed. Then David laughed. "Just messing with you," he said. "Nothing there." And he gave me a hard pat on the back as I stood up. I laughed along because I did not know what else to do. I took a few steps sideways to put some distance between us. The other two men were smiling, but not at the joke. They were looking at David. And then, they were looking at me. I asked if David liked the couch, trying to push things toward an end. He looked at his friends, then back at me. His expression had shifted. The grin was still there, but something behind it had changed. There was a pause that lasted a beat too long. Then one of the men took me to the ground. It happened fast. My instinct to fight back lasted about 2 seconds before his weight made it impossible. He held me face down against the hardwood floor. My cheek pressed into it, while David and the other man moved through the rest of the house. I could hear drawers opening, things being knocked over, rooms being gone through. After a few minutes, David called from somewhere near the front door. The man on top of me got up and ran. I heard the truck outside rev and pull away fast. I lay on the floor for a while before I could make myself get up. When I finally did, I walked to the front door and locked it. Then I called the police. The name David was not real. The phone number he had used was not attached to any real identity. The email address traced to nothing. Officers collected fingerprints and photographed shoe impressions in the yard, but the case went cold. No suspects were ever identified. The one thing investigators did confirm was that the shoe prints from my house matched prints found at another home in the area from a similar incident a few weeks earlier. That person had also been alone. The working theory was that they targeted people living by themselves, and I had handed them that information in the first phone call, without even realizing I was doing it, when I explained that my roommate had already moved out. I have not listed anything on Craigslist since. I probably never will. Being in your own home does not mean you are safe. I thought it did. I was wrong. Story 2. The Truck. My name is Connor. I was young, I did not have much money, and I needed a vehicle. That is the full context for every decision I made in this story. I had been scrolling through Craigslist looking at used trucks when I found one listed for $4,000. The price was low, but not suspicious enough to walk away from. I messaged the seller, and he responded quickly. He answered every question I asked about the truck, with what sounded like honesty. He said it was not the prettiest thing to look at, but it would get me where I needed to go reliably. We agreed to meet at a Burger King that was roughly halfway between where we both lived. I got there first, having taken an Uber since I obviously did not have a vehicle yet. He showed up about 5 minutes after me. He was older, average build, the kind of face you would not be able to describe an hour later. We talked for a bit. He told me more about the truck, some minor issues in the past, nothing serious. He seemed straightforward about it, which I appreciated. Then I asked if I could test drive it. He said sure. He knew a quieter parking lot nearby where I could get a proper feel for it without traffic. I pulled out my phone to request an Uber over there. He told me not to bother. Said it was just across the street, that we could ride together and save the time. I should have said no. Looking back, I can say that plainly. But I was young. He was older, and for whatever reason I had assigned him some authority based purely on that. I thought refusing would seem rude. I got in. We did not go across the street. We went a few blocks away from the Burger King, off the main road, to an empty parking lot that sat away from any visible traffic. That was the first thing that registered clearly as wrong, though by that point it was the third or fourth thing I should have already acted on. He put the car in park and said we could switch there. As we were passing each other around the front of the truck, he tossed the keys toward me. He said heads up, but the throw was nowhere near my hands. I would have had to dive onto the pavement to catch them. They landed on the ground a few feet in front of me. I bent down to pick them up. His foot caught me in the side before I was fully upright. Then his weight was on me, and his hand was already pulling the wallet from my back pocket. He was on his feet and running back toward the truck before I had fully processed what had happened. I grabbed the keys off the ground thinking he had forgotten them in the rush, that maybe I could use them as leverage for some kind of trade. He drove away. The keys I was holding were not the truck keys. They were something else, decoys, tossed to get me to look down at exactly the right moment. I stood in an empty parking lot blocks from the Burger King with no car, no wallet, and no license plate number because it had all happened too fast. My first call was to cancel my only card before he could use it. Then I called the police and walked back to the Burger King to file the report. The truck he drove was a rusty white pickup. The seller profile on Craigslist used a name pulled from a video game. The ad was taken down before officers could document it. No plate. No real name. No arrest. I lost $4,000 in cash that I had borrowed from my father. I had to wait for a replacement card in the mail. I had to replace my license. And none of it was recovered. The whole thing took less than 30 seconds from the moment I bent down for those keys. Story 3. The House with No Pictures. My name is Rosa. For about 7 months, I had been running my own cleaning business, listing my services independently through Craigslist Marketplace after leaving the company I had worked for. The work was good. The clients were mostly normal. I had cleaned hundreds of homes by that point, and had a reliable sense of when something felt off and when it did not. Then, I answered an email from a man asking me to clean his house. He sent a video walkthrough of the space ahead of time, which was standard. The house looked clean already. That also was not unusual. Some clients just want consistent maintenance and attention to the details they cannot get to themselves. We agreed on a date. I was scheduled to be there for about 3.5 hours, working top floor down. No basement. Extra care on the kitchen and bathroom tile. When I arrived, he greeted me at the door and led me upstairs so I could work my way down. And then, he just stayed. I have had clients watch me work before, usually older women who are particular about how things get done. But this was different. He was not watching what I was cleaning. He was watching me. I asked if there was anything specific he wanted me to prioritize. He said, "You know, when I saw your ad on Craigslist, I knew I had to have you here." I did not read it as threatening right away. I had heard things like that before from clients who had some idea in their heads about who should be cleaning their house. I let it go. Told him I generally preferred to work with the room to myself, and he said that was fine. He left the room. But he went to the room directly across the hallway, sat on the edge of the bed, and watched me from there through the open door. That was when I started thinking about how I was going to get through the next 3 hours. I worked my way toward the door and used the vacuum as a reason to move it nearly shut, just enough to block his sightline for the rest of that room. Then I moved into the attached bathroom to start on the grout. About 20 minutes in, I felt it again. That specific awareness of being watched. I turned around. He was standing in the doorway. He apologized for interrupting. Said he forgot to mention that the vanity should be left exactly as it was. That it had been his wife's. She had passed away in 2009, and he wanted it preserved exactly as she had left it. I told him that was no problem. He stood there for a moment longer than necessary, and then left. I started working around the vanity. That was when I noticed the makeup on the counter. I recognized some of the products, not because I am an expert, but because I had been excited when a few of those specific items came out. They were released no earlier than 2015. This was 2017. His wife had not touched that vanity since 2009. Someone had. I finished the upper floor without him reappearing, which was the only relief I had for the next stretch of time. Going downstairs, I moved into the kitchen and started there. From the kitchen, you could see into the living room, and something about it stopped me. No photographs. Not one. I had cleaned hundreds of homes. People who lived alone, people who had been through loss, people who had moved in the week before. Everyone had something on their walls. A card on the refrigerator. A framed print. Something. This house had nothing. Not a single image of any person anywhere in the visible space. I was moving faster now, trying to cut the job short and get out. Then, he appeared in the archway between the kitchen and the living room. He said he wanted to ask a favor. He knew the job had not included the basement, but he had guests coming next week, and he just wanted the floors down there quickly vacuumed. Shouldn't take long. I told him I was on a tight schedule and might not have time today. Maybe next time. He offered to skip the dining room entirely and just have me do the basement floors instead. A trade. I said I could come back tomorrow and do the whole basement properly. I was stalling, trying to push it to a time when I could simply not show up. That was when his tone changed. He became frustrated in a quiet way. He said he did not understand why I would not just do the floor today. That it would only take a few minutes. And then he said he and his wife really needed the floors done down there. His wife. The one who had died years ago. He asked if he could just show me what needed to be done. Said it would only take a moment to walk down and see. I took my phone to the other room and called a friend. I spoke in Spanish, quietly and quickly, and gave her the address. I asked her to come and make sure I got to my car without being followed. Then, I went back out and told him I had just gotten a call about a family emergency and needed to leave. That I could come back tomorrow to finish. He looked at me for a long moment. His expression was flat, empty in a way that made my chest tight. He said, "Don't bother," and he walked upstairs. I gathered my supplies and got to the front door as quickly as I could move without running. My friend pulled up while I was loading my trunk. He was standing at the upstairs window the entire time, watching me from above until I pulled away. I called the police when I got home. They told me that without a specific threat or a law being broken, there was not much they could do. They told me not to go back. I was not going back. I do not know what was in that basement. I do not know what he had planned for the woman in his house who could not leave the way I did. I only know that something in that house was deeply wrong, and the only reason I am able to say so is because I trusted that feeling before he got me down those stairs. If you do this kind of work, always tell someone the address before you go. Always have someone who knows when you are supposed to be done. And if something feels wrong, it does not have to make complete sense for you to act on it. The feeling is enough. Trust it. That is Jamie, Connor, and Rosa. 3 ordinary transactions on a familiar website, and 3 moments where the wrong decision would have changed everything. If their stories stayed with you, make sure you are subscribed to the Chamber Files right now. New first-hand accounts drop every single week from real people who need someone else to know what happened. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one. And if something has happened to you through an online listing, at a stranger's home, somewhere that felt routine until it was not, send it to us. The address is thechamberfiles@gmail.com. We read every single submission. We will see you in the next one. If you are still awake,